Today, I'm going to cover some things that are not in your typical pitch template or blog or things that Chat GTP will say if you ask, what should I put in a pitch? Those things are everywhere. You can get that anytime. So I want to offer some of my own unique thoughts that don't show up anywhere else. So you came here because you want to know how to structure a deck that engages investors. The short answer is that you structure a deck the way your ideal investor thinks, so that you make it all about them. To do that, we'll get a little bit in the head of a typical investor, but you'll have to learn about your ideal investor because all investors are different. But I want you to be able to transform your vision into a pitch deck that really speaks to investors. And to get you in a place that you can do that, it does require some mindset shift. So there's two mindsets I would like you to be ready to think about. Write these down and really take that in, because this will make all the difference in how you create. The first mindset I want you to embrace is that to be authentic, your story is unique. You're doing something really bold and exciting. So we want you to stand out as being bold and unique and authentic. Okay? Don't try to hide that. That's what helps you to be remembered. The second mindset I would like for you to embrace is to be investor focused. And what I mean by that is that everything that you put in your deck and when you deliver your pitch is focused to the benefit of your ideal investor. Now, you might be saying, Dana, so how do I be investor focused and authentic at the same time? Here's how. Think of your pitch as a gift. Okay, you're gifting investors this opportunity. So you want it to be authentic, but yet you need to make it as you would a gift. For example, if a close friend of yours were getting married and you decided, I'm not going to order off of the wedding list, I'm going to get something unique from me. You're going to think of something that's meaningful and important to that friend. But it's also going to be authentically you, so they remember that you gave it to them. And then you're going to package that gift with care to make sure they receive it. So with your pitch, create content that's meaningful to your ideal investor, and then package it and deliver it so that they get it. So let's talk about packaging this pitch deck. Okay, being in that investor focused mindset will help you to pitch according to how investors think. Why is this important? Well, investors see a lot of decks. And I want you to be remembered and stand out, because you need to do that in order to keep their attention and make them curious. Because if you lose their attention, it's unlikely you'll ever get a call back. So we know we need to keep their attention. We want to pitch according to how they think. And the key to doing that is that to give them the information that they want. So let's get in the head of investors to understand what they want. So every time an investor opens a pitch deck that they receive, they're going to be asking themselves, could this be a wildly successful business? And you think, yeah, okay, that seems obvious. Right. But often investors are not showing how their business could be successful. I'll give you an example. Last month, I was a pitch judge at a very large event, and the judges were given very specific criteria to judge the pitches. And the founders were told at the beginning, here's the rubric, you're going to be judged on these things. There were 5 or 6 things like team, problem, market, business model, technology. So everybody knew what the criteria was. And what did most founders pitch on? Put that in the chat if you think you know what most founders pitched on. John, I think you'll know this.
Yeah, I have a lot of jumping up and down going on my side of the screen right now.
Okay,
But I'm going to be
Dan and
quiet.
Alicia got it. Product. Yes. Now we've got the answers there. Most founders talked about their product. And this is a common mistake. In fact, like most pitches that I see, founders are talking more about their product than they are about their business. And I get it. It's human nature because we love to talk about what we're excited about and what we're working on. And you, as a founder, are probably deep in product development and talking about product to your team and to your customers. But investors are looking at the business potential, not your product. So this is such a common mistake. I've given it a name. It's a product-focused pitch. And it's a tough mistake because if you're giving a pitch or showing your pitch deck and you show a lot about your product and there's information on how it works, how it was developed, and demoing the features, you risk losing the interest of investors. They get bored because investors are not your customers. Let that sink in a minute. We don't want investors to get bored hearing about product features. So now we want to cover, how do you really want to make sure then you cover what investors are thinking about?
Maybe I could focus that language just a tad bit.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that investors are not customers of your product, but investors are customers of your business. They're buying your
Yes.
business. And so when we use the word customer, it might be in two contexts. Am I processing that correctly?
Yes. So you want to think of investors as customers of, they're going to buy your business. So you need to talk about your business. Not get deep in product features because they really don't care until they're doing due diligence and they want to figure out if it works. So let's now dig in a little bit on, so what do they really want in a deck? I'm going to talk about teaser decks today in the interest of clarity and being able to focus on something. Teaser decks are slightly different than your pitching deck, but don't worry, they'll follow a very similar structure, but you will need to create your teaser deck first. So that's where we're going to start. I would like you to put in the chat, what do you think is the purpose of a teaser deck? Somebody put that in the chat, please. There you go. We've got one. Next meeting. The purpose of that deck is to create curiosity and get a meeting. It's kind of like if you're looking for a job and you send a resume, a great resume might get you an interview. So in your teaser deck, you want to put enough information in there to explain what you do. And it gives a good idea of the key parts of your business. And it's visual, so it can add impact to your pitch story. But there's a lot of mistakes that people make in teaser decks. And the most common one that I see is TMI, too much information. Because actually, you do not need to include everything that investors might want to know in order to make an investment decision. If you try to include everything that they might want to know, that deck will be cluttered and confusing. And you've probably seen, cluttered, confusing emails that come in. If something looks cluttered and confusing, we give up and we close it. So let's just keep in mind the purpose of that teaser deck. If that's to create curiosity and get a meeting, you only need to give enough to make them curious and want to know more. So that teaser deck needs to be concise. I want you to think of as focus on clarity over completeness. Clear and concise, not complete, and cluttered. Here's some general guidelines on some things that I've learned about a good teaser deck. Generally, they're about 10 to 16 slides, no appendix slides, right? You save that for the meeting. I want you to keep in mind that a teaser deck is shareable. Investors might share it with other investors to gauge interest, and you might not know who's seeing it. Yes, you can track it to see who's opening it, but sometimes you kind of lose control on where it's being shared. So with a teaser deck, you do not put anything secret in there. You do not add anything that you wouldn't want a competitor to see. That's the word of caution. A teaser deck also needs to be very easy to read, and here's why. Fun fact. In my non-scientific survey of investors that I've met in the last couple of years, VCs spend an average of 2 minutes looking at a deck before they decide if they want to learn more or not. In fact, that might even be coming down a little bit as attention spans become shorter. So I'd like to see a teaser deck that's skimmable, that an investor can look at it and skim through your whole deck in 2 minutes or less and get a really good idea of what you do and learn what they want to know. And that means for each slide, it needs to be a really clear and concise message that's focused just on what investors are going to want. So it needs to be very precise. It also needs to have complete thoughts, because in a teaser deck, you're not there to explain things. So you can't have it so short that it's just a word. It needs to be a thought, whether it's a phrase or a short sentence, but clear and concise enough that they can skim it. And I realize that this is easier said than done. So let's talk about how you can create this investor-focused teaser deck that is also skimmable. Raise your hand if you've ever downloaded a pitch template. Anyone raise their hand? Because if you have, okay, yes, I realize that's pretty common. I highly recommend that you do not download a template and just start filling it in to create your deck. And here's why. Okay, if you've downloaded one, that's fine. You can use it as reference of topics you want to cover, particularly for that particular investor. But if you download a template and you start filling it in, there is nothing that will stifle your train of thought and creativity more than filling in a slide. Have you ever had this experience? I certainly have, where I open a slide, I'm going to add something, and I'm like, oh, I have to move the text box, change the font, change the size, adjust the background color. What was I going to say? Right? It's just not conducive to brainstorming and thinking and creativity. So open your slides last, because every pitch and story is different. And if you download a template and start filling it in, then you're the same. And every story is unique. And you should allow your deck to follow the path that best suits your story in the most compelling way. And a template lacks creativity. And I want you to stand out and be remembered and not look like everyone else. So save those templates for reference. We're going to create something unique and authentic with a better story. So instead of a template, focus on covering the key themes that investors want. So here are those key themes that you must cover in your teaser deck. First of all, you might want to write these down. Problem. Show that you are solving a hard problem. And you're thinking, yes, that's obvious. And every pitch template says problem. The thing is that most problem statements lack urgency. You need to demonstrate that your customers have a pain point that they would pay to solve. And that takes some brainstorming and thinking to come up with that statement. Second, solution. Investors want to see what is your solution and why is it unique? And also that it solves the problem that you're talking about. A third, market opportunity. Is there an opportunity in the market given the size and current trends? Investors are looking for potential for massive growth here. So you need to make sure that it shows that there's potential for growth and that there's trends happening that are supporting that. Next, team. That you are the right team to grow this business. And the next one, traction or market validation. Investors are looking for validation that there's a market for this business. So these things seem kind of obvious, but it's really important that you come up with ways to make them impactful and to stand out. So I'll give you some examples here. For example, the problem and solution. If they are solving a really complicated problem or many problems, or it's just hard to describe, and if you're finding that investors are just not getting it when you're describing your problem, try storytelling. A story of your customer's journey from pain point to solution can be really memorable and powerful. I'll give you an example. I heard a pitch because I'm in E8, I'm a climate tech investor, and I heard somebody pitch saying, the problem is climate change. But then when he talked about his solution did not solve climate change. So there was no match. It was very vague, really confusing. So we had a little chat and I gave him some feedback. And then I saw him pitch at an event, different event a week later, where he said, here's Farmer Maria. She's a farmer in Eastern Washington, and she loses 25% of her crop from farm to customer, which is a huge loss of revenue. And our solution reduces crop wastage by 50%. Boom, that's easy to relate to. And it's so memorable, I remember it years later. So you want to come up with something that's memorable, easy to understand, and that investors will remember that, hey, this is a big problem. We should support this. Next one, market opportunity. In my opinion, market opportunity is the slide that's mostly a missed opportunity. Sorry if that sounds harsh, but market opportunity should be about way more than TAM. Nothing makes an investor's eyes roll more than a slide that just has a huge TAM. Okay, that number is meaningless. So think of it this way, okay? I want to like really dig in on what's the potential here. If you and I are chatting over coffee and I ask you, so why does this market have potential? What are you noticing in the industry that makes you think that it needs this business? What's going on? What would you say to that? What are the trends that you notice because you're in the industry that an investor might not notice? That's what we want to hear about. Also, tell us about your initial target market. Who is that? And how big is that? Okay, I'm going to tell you my biggest pet peeve in a pitch. And it's when somebody puts their SOM as a percentage of TAM. Okay, so somebody might say, our serviceable obtainable market is 10% of TAM, and if we reach that, we'll have this many hundreds of millions of dollars in market. That is just a wild guess. And in my opinion, it means nothing. Right? Why 10%? Why not 20? Why not 5? Maybe you'll reach 1%. Like a percentage of a big market is really meaningless. We want to know who that is. Who's that segment that's your initial market? Who's your beachhead? If you're targeting, let's say, enterprise customers with a very specific problem of this size, and there's 5,000 of them in the US, and they'll pay $1,000 a year for my service, that's a $5 million serviceable obtainable market. That means something. I would want to know that as opposed to a percentage of TAM. Okay, so I got that off my chest. Please don't ever do that. Okay, next thing that's really important is team, right? That's obvious. Everybody has a team slide, picture, title. Here we are. But investors really want to understand why you are the best founder or team for this business. And that's way more than photos and titles in your last job. Tell us why you in 1 or 2 sentences. Just last week, a client told me that investors, when he met with them, were very impressed with his expertise, but that they didn't understand it before the meeting. They didn't realize just how qualified he is. So we redid his team slide together and to emphasize his unique experience. And yes, it took a while to brainstorm to come up with that, but it didn't add a lot of clutter. It was just 1 extra line at the top and an extra line under his photo. And that made all the difference. You see that and you go, wow, this guy knows his industry. So I want you to think about why you, and make sure investors can see that. Okay, the other one, traction or market validation. So it's really important that you show investors that you have validated that there's a market for this business, whether that's discovery calls, that you have some pilots ongoing, you've done this market research. Even if you don't have sales, you can find a place in your deck to tell your story about your market validation. Maybe in your go-to-market, you talk about the pilots that are ongoing, that are, or in your, maybe in your, well, whether it's your traction or your, there's so many places, like even in your market, showing that you understand your customer. And these are the people that I've talked to, or just put it in there in a story in your investor letter. There's ways to show that you have validation. You just need to be a little creative. For example, I'm working with a new client that impresses me very much because I first told her we're going to start after you have market validation. So she did 30 customer discovery calls in 2 weeks and booked our first meeting. But out of those 30 calls, she has 2 LOIs. Well, that's validation. A small segment and already letters of intent. So these are the things that you can put somewhere in your messaging, in your story, to show that you know your customers. Okay, so let's now talk about how do you actually craft your pitch story. This is what I do with my clients, so I'll take you through part of the process. Did you know that planning your pitch message before starting working on slides can save you hours of editing later? It does, trust me. So with my clients, we plan the pitch message first before we even look at slides. This saves lots of time. It makes it easy to edit, easy to think, easy to brainstorm, easy to share with your team. And you can practice your message. So here are the steps. 1, brainstorm. 2, plan. 3, write out the editorial copy for your deck. Right? So brainstorming. It takes a little time to brainstorm and think of the concise narrative for each section of your pitch. Thinking, of course, what would my ideal investor want to know? But do this first because, keeping in mind, you want to make your deck skimmable. So you can't write a paragraph on your slides. Investors won't read it. You need to come up with a couple lines that are really clear and concise. And this takes brainstorming and editing and practice. Second step is to plan. Plan out your whole pitch narrative. So here's a tip that I use is to storyboard your whole pitch. Whether you use paper or a whiteboard or Post-it notes. I really love Post-it notes across the wall because then you can rearrange them. And I use that when I plan a training program. I've got Post-it notes that I stick on big poster board. Making a storyboard is really helpful because it's visual and you can look at it and go, okay, this makes sense. You can try it out loud and then go, you know, it doesn't make sense. I need to rearrange it. I need to adjust that. I need to edit this down. I need to add information. So, and it's a fun thing to do with your team. And there's ways to kind of make it work online as well. And I do with my clients, I have these online tools where we can both be adding information and editing. So whatever works for you, try the storyboard, whether it's online or Post-it notes. Then, after you've worked out the narrative, then you write out the editorial copy for your slides before you start designing. That way, it's then when you open the slides, it's just easy to create. And it's easy to keep them simple. You're not like stuck in there, oh, what else was I going to say on this? And they don't get full of things that aren't needed. It's also then very easy if you don't like slides to delegate. You can hand somebody and go, here's my editorial copy. Make it look nice. Done. So that's, my preference, and everybody's different. You might like creating slides, but not too many people are good at it. Okay, this also helps you, besides it keeping it simple, it helps you stay focused on what investors want to know because you're creating the copy when you're not in design mode. So when you actually start on planning the deck, here's something to think about. Getting back in the head of investors, when they first look at a deck, investors want to understand what it is that you're doing. And they want to figure out if you're a fit for them. Are you within their investment criteria? So make it easy. Make it really easy for them to understand right away what you do. An investor friend of mine this week, when he found out I was doing this, said, please tell them that the first slide should be what you do. So there you go. I put it in for him. So the first slide is not just an intro with your logo and website or name. Give us that phrase or sentence of what it is that you do. In presentation skills speak, we call this the hook. It's that hook that people understand quickly and it gets their attention and it's in 1 or 2 lines of clarity. This needs to be easy to understand, no jargon. Write it as if you were explaining this to someone not in your industry. So, think of it, you and I are having coffee and so what do you do? If you kind of throw out a lot of techno speak, that's not how people normally talk over coffee. Well, unless you're talking to your tech team. But, an outside person who's not in your industry, how would you explain that if you're chatting over coffee? And then brainstorm till you get it down to a really clear and concise message. So put yes or no in the chat if you think that you have a good hook. Because I'm happy to practice them after this when we get to Q&A. Anybody want to admit, yes, I've got one, or no, I don't? Not yet. That's okay. Oh, Manfred has one. Okay, so we've got a few people that think they've got one and some don't. So a really good hook is something that conveys what it is you do, but not what you're building. like think of it from your customer perspective. What are the outcomes that you're providing for your customers? That often helps you get into a better frame of mind on how you would describe it to someone not in your industry. Okay, now that's the start of your teaser deck. We've talked about brainstorming, planning, and then the editorial copy. I want to compare this briefly to your pitching deck. Okay, so a pitching deck, when your pitch deck that you're using when you're there in person, whether it's online, one-on-one meeting, or in front of an angel group, you're there doing the talking. So you can actually have fewer words on your slide because we want the focus to be on you. We don't want people to be reading your deck. We want them to be listening to you, and your deck is there for them to go, oh, I get it. Or yes, that makes sense. And appendix slides, you can have appendix slides in your pitch deck for Q&A, but please don't put them in your teaser deck because you want that meeting if they have questions. Okay, so a good teaser deck will get you a meeting. But to get investment, you need more than that. So you need a clear pitch message. You need engaging delivery so that you're connecting to investors and they have confidence in your ability. You need that great pitching deck to support that message. And you need to be really prepared for Q&A, which all of those topics we're not covering today because today was about teaser decks. So I know it sounds a little daunting, but if you want help with this, let me know, because it's important that you're able to save time and get talking to the right investors and to have clarity on your message for the different types of investors that you'll be talking to, and to make sure that your pitch is really ready for the investors that are going to be looking at it, and for you to be confident in your pitching skills and your Q&A. So back to teaser deck. When it comes to teaser deck, I have a download for you. I'm going to